Alright, everybody. 1 second, let me make Rob full screen there. Welcome to another week of Game Wisdom Live. This is going to be for the week of October 5th, 2017. And if you may have noticed, no more extended pre-streams. I had a chance to watch a few people the other night, and I realized having a pre-stream can be a bit boring. And I don't want you guys to be waiting around for 5 to 10 minutes with nothing going on. So I decided to cut things there. But as always, I am Josh Beiser, and joining me, my co-host, streamer Robert Leach.
Hi, everybody.
Hey Rob, how are you doing this week?
I am very good. How about yourself?
I am doing fine. I'm getting ready for my next presentation for tomorrow, and got a few bit of announcements regarding the Pateron and plans for the month of October. So let me just cut this out here. There we go. So first things first, new month means we need a new target for Patreon. And what I've decided after talking to a few of my friends is the $100 goal for the month of October will get you a controversial games live stream. You guys, anyone who votes for $5 or more on patreon.com/gwbeiser will get to pick a game of, something that is either of ill repute or has earned some controversy over the years, and that will be a game that I will do either a live stream or dissecting design on sometime in November. I'll come up with a list of, certain restrictions and whatnot in the coming days, but I figured that'll be like kind of an interesting goal for November and something that we probably haven't seen too much of in the past. Another idea is I'm going to be updating the Patreon for the $1 and $5 tiers, as well as changing the wording around for the Patreon itself over the weekend. And what I've decided is another little way of, adding more fan interaction is I figure since we have the Saturday Night Grab Bag already, that once a month I will pick a game based on like tags voted on by the patrons. And that will be like a game that I will stream at the end of the month kind of thing. And we'll do the same thing, like $1 will let you just get to voting, but anyone who donates $5 or more will actually get to suggest a tag. And, I'll leave the list completely open, so whatever crazy tags people want to vote on, that's what I'll try and pick a game from. And again, I figure it'll be like a nice little way of getting more fan interaction, and, allowing me to play a very, very diverse offering of games, hopefully, in the future. So, what do you think about that, Rob? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you have any suggestions?
I like it. I like the idea of going for the games of ill repute. I like that. I think that that brings up an awful lot of history, going all the way back to text adventure games, and makes things interesting.
Yeah. So I figure, it's another way of just trying to mix things up and maybe get some more interest for everybody. In terms of hitting that goal, I mean, we're still at from the Patreon of last month, we're only $8 away, so we'll see if there are any takers. But, like I said, for those of you guys watching this live or recorded, I will be making the changes and updates to the Patreon either tomorrow, Friday, or over the weekend, and then making a launch announcement about for Monday. But I think with that said, let's get to some topics or things that's been going on. So I guess the first thing is, over the week, of course, I've been playing the heck out of Cuphead. I know you were watching me on my marathon stream of beating that game in one night.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I didn't know that. I didn't expect you to be able to do it, but you did. That was really cool to watch.
Have you had a chance to play it yet, Rob?
No, I haven't. I'm still limited in my games purchasing budget lately, but that's on my list. I just love the visuals. That's really what draws me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been some interesting discussions regarding difficulty when it comes to those kinds of games. So I was just talking to Josh about this earlier. I almost called Josh Rob there, but Rob, what did you think of those kinds of challenges in video games?
I mean, I really do. I like a game to be difficult, or at least have that option. I mean, growing up with a Nintendo, that's basically you had for kids, and then you had regular games, which are all pretty difficult. So there was really not much in the way of ramping up to difficulty or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea that Cuphead is difficult. I think for a game as short as Cuphead, you kind of need to skew towards difficult. Just because you don't want people beating it all in like in an hour, that's ridiculous. I mean, you managed to do it in what, an hour and a half or 2 hours?
It was like 3.5 hours
Oh, three
was
and a half hours.
on the stream, and then I just did a speed run of it last night. Beat it in I think 50 minutes was my
Oh
speed
wow.
run.
Yeah, that'll happen. I mean, once someone gets used to it, and certainly you're a way above average gamer.
Mm-hmm.
An expert gamer might be able to cut that initial time in half, and then the speed run. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen some of the S level expert runs.
Oh,
Uh,
jeez.
those are nuts and very impressive, but like it just goes to show how fast people can become accustomed and just beat the crap out of a game.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Oh,
hell,
hi,
bro.
Mark. I love that. When is that movie coming out? I can't wait. It's December, right? The Room thing, documentary.
Oh goodness, there's an actual documentary on that now.
It's a mockumentary with
Uh,
James Franco.
oh, that's good. Can't wait to see that one. Elgora, we were just talking about some changes to the Patreon and some of the new goals and rewards going forward. So we're going to have some additional voting, and I'll make a special video and update over the weekend for that. But yeah, getting back to the topic, yeah, like something like Cuphead, like that's a game that is heavily defined, I think, by its difficulty and what they wanted the player to get out of it. So, and there's been discussion about trying to make it more accessible and more accommodating, and I just don't see like Cuphead being one of those games.
The one problem I have with Cuphead being accessible is that it is an art style that will attract an awful lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an art style that, as far as I know, has not been utilized in video games, and that's what made it so attractive,
Mm-hmm.
certainly to me. Um, and when you have that kind of pull, you're going to get a huge variety of skill levels, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily want to kick too many of them in the shins, just for buying the game. So I can see the reasoning for having a variety of different skill levels in the game, but I do agree with you in our discussions
Mm-hmm.
with Discord that designing for that is its own
Mm-hmm.
pain.
Yeah. And it's why I think a lot of games it's just easier not to have difficulty settings. Just have one baseline of this is what my game is. If you can do it, great. If you can't, then unfortunately this game isn't for you, kind of thing. It
Right.
just removes, I think, a lot of the guesswork and uncertainty there.
Yeah.
Now, speaking about difficult games, as a very interesting twist that happened, a fan donated to me the DLC for Dark Souls 3 earlier, saying, I couldn't beat it, but let's see what you can do. And I was like, I kind of went through like, yay, I got the DLC. It's like, oh god, I'm going to have to beat the DLC now, kind of thing. Because anyone who's played Dark Souls knows that they save the good stuff for the DLC, especially in Bloodborne with Ludwig and Lady, I think Maria or Lady Astoria, of the final parts of the Bloodborne DLC, which that was some fun to play. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah, again, one of those games in particular, I have not been able to dig
Mm.
into them, but I am very impressed with. Like, I saw a speed run of Dark Souls,
Oh,
and
jeez.
it didn't even. I mean, the fact is, like, the guy never even did battle really. He just kind of ran through,
Mm-hmm.
just jumping past everything, using glitches to fly beneath town models and
Yeah.
stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of glitch runs. I kind of feel like it defeats the purpose of master level play. Like, I love watching people who play like the Kaizo levels and the, ROM hacks like that.
Yeah, I agree. I love seeing the glitches. That's one thing that I enjoy is when people find these glitches in games and just kind of showcase that
Mm-hmm.
these projects are far from perfect, and utilizing them to get through a game faster, I think, is an interesting art form. But
Mm-hmm.
watching a skill,
Mm-hmm.
someone who has mastered a particular game, I think that is an entirely different thing,
Yeah.
and has its own entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
And all boss runs are good, yes. glitchless, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
100% glitchless is my favorite.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not a big fan of any percent, but I'll take it where I can get it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, GP. This is Robert Leach. He's a streamer on Twitch, and he's my co-host for our
Yeah,
live shows.
how's it going, GP?
What was I about to say? Let's see. Dark Souls. Ah, nuts! I just forgot. Oh, now I remember. If you had a chance yet, Rob, we were just talking on Discord about I did the pacifist run on Cuphead earlier, which is you have to beat all the run and gun levels without shooting your weapon, so you cannot attack any enemies in all 6 of those levels. And the fun part was the people watching it's only like a 12, 13-minute long video. It took me a lot longer than that to do 6 perfect plays. One of them, I was starting to talk, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to restart. We're just going to keep going with this hit because I've stopped enough time. Oh,
Yeah.
hi, Josh. We have another Josh in the chat. He's from the podcast named Indie Game Riot. We were talking about maybe having me be a guest host for that at some point. But
Oh,
hey,
cool.
thanks for coming on. But yeah, like getting back to like the challenge and what Oscar was saying above, an easy Cuphead would be a different game. It's the same thing with Dark Souls.
Yeah.
I was just telling Josh, not Josh in chat, my other. I know, like, it's great. Now I know, like, 3 or 4 different Joshes. It's going to get really confusing soon. But I was just talking to Josh on Skype earlier about, like, something like Dark Souls with its difficulty. Like, it wouldn't be the same game. Like, they made that experience explicitly around a certain skill level. And if you can't meet it, I hate to say it, but them's the breaks. For those of you who've been watching the Dark Souls 3 play, I spent about 30 minutes stuck on the tutorial boss on the first night. And that was very fun. And then last night I beat the Abyss Watchers, which is one of the 4 main bosses, on my second try. So it's like, it's always weird coming back to playing Dark Souls, because you forget everything with those games.
Yeah, and to your point about Cuphead, El Goro, I mean, it certainly would be, and I do feel like though they, I think they do have to make it more difficult, like I said, because it's just a short gameplay. That art style took an awful lot of their time to develop, and it was probably a very hindering thing. So yeah, unless they add about triple the amount of stuff, they can't make it too much easier.
Yeah, without essentially breaking the game in half like that.
Yeah.
And I said this on Twitter, but I kind of felt that Cuphead was a little too easy in some aspect. That once you broke that skill wall, it didn't feel like there was anywhere else to go in that. But with that said, I just want to quickly say I have not S ranked the game perfectly yet. That's going to take some doing.
Yeah, and it reminds me very much of Beautiful Joe back in the day. It has that same kind of feel.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of things to master, and if you want to perfect it, yeah, there's an awful lot of time that has to go into it. But this one, it seemed like when you were playing, it was that dash thing, that mastering that basically made you an expert level player alone, just because you could get out of trouble pretty much whenever you wanted.
I am loving our chat right now with all the
cool.
different Josh titles there. So good on you if you can see my thumbs up there. Perfect. Let me see. And like we were just saying, for those of you who are new, if you want to hang out with us and talk game design and all manner of topics, $1 or more to patreon.com/GWBicer will get you invited to our Discord. And there will be some new voting and rewards coming up probably in a few days as well. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and again, another Josh had a good point there that at some point, who are you making this game for if you just keep making it more and more accessible? Because I was just
Mm.
saying this on Skype, but there's no such thing as a 100% accessible game. Everyone can play this game, everyone's going to enjoy it. It just seems like a fool's errand like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I was just gonna say
yeah.
like casual, making a game casual basically is
Hmm.
what I attribute to that. And even on when I'm playing Torchlight 2, I'll play in casual mode.
Hmm.
Certainly, there's no one who would associate with a normal casual game who would be interested in playing that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's not possible. It's just not even close.
Hmm. I mean, you can make things accessible, but I think this was another big point that I think this was a good one we were just talking about because people were equating an easy mode to Assassin's Creed's Discovery mode. If you heard the news about that, did you hear
I have
that?
not. No, no, not the Assassin. I saw some news about Assassin's Creed, but it had more to do with the developer talking about some new features. But I didn't read the. I haven't read anything about what you're talking about.
What they're going to be doing is they're going to have a mode called Discovery Mode in the new Assassin's Creed that basically removes the gameplay and allows people to wander around and basically learn about the Egyptian mythology or the Egyptian culture without needing to play the game or master the mechanics.
Right.
And that was brought up during the discussion about Cuphead with having like a skip mode or an easy setting or easier setting, I should say. And the problem, though, is for one thing, Assassin's Creed is still in development. Like, this is not a game that's been out. And I kind of feel, I was just talking to Josh about this, that once the game is out, discussions about what they should or shouldn't add in become moot at that point. Because you can't really change the game once it's been put out like that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the other point is that Assassin's Creed, like, again, like it's a historical setting, so there is educational value. Like I would honestly love to see like a animation or like a flip book kind of thing for Cuphead. I think that would be beautiful. But again, that's not the same as playing the game, and the real meat of that game is the insane boss fights.
Yeah, and I think that if you're wanting to, now more than ever, it's more accessible to appreciate a game by just watching someone play it
Hmm.
who's better than you, than demanding a game be made easy just so you can experience
Hmm.
um, all of the interesting story and animation. Yeah, just watch someone like you play, and you'll get to see all that. Like you'll get to see all the cool animations and bosses and all that
Hmm.
stuff. It's readily available. There's dozens of and dozens of players from all level of skill
Hmm.
checking it out. So yeah, go do that. And
Yeah.
as far as the whole walk around and learn Egyptian, I'm just like, why don't they just link to Wikipedia? It's just, um, but at the same time, I'm sure they're
Hmm.
going to make it pretty interesting.
Yeah. Let me see. People can do the story. Yeah, and that's another really good point there, Oscar, because this was coming up on Twitter because I was talking to an indie dev about this, and she didn't really like answer my point that at some like for some of these games, the difficulty is the experience or the gameplay is the focal point, and there's always been that discussion about where is the drive to play this game. It goes back to the Mass Effect example and having the story mode, which just neuters the gameplay in favor of people who just want to see the story. And like I can see some reasoning in that if the game is story driven, but if we're talking about a game like Dark Souls or Cuphead or you name it, where the point is playing the game, like I can't see having something that basically lets you skip the content.
Yeah, I mean, it is either you make a movie
Hmm.
or you make a game into a game. Like
Hmm.
the game is its own medium. You can't just change it to, like you say, flipbook or
Hmm.
movie, and then expect people to enjoy it in the same way. That's why I figure out about the watching the gameplay.
Yeah.
Now to El Gordo's comment, which could certainly turn into a massive discussion along
Hmm.
the lines of piracy. Like, how does video like
Hmm.
this affect a purchase of a game?
Yeah.
We've touched on it before, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you can really worry about that. It's just going to happen,
Yeah.
or you're going to just be busy suing everyone you can.
Mm-hmm. And Josh is talking about this was another point. The simple mode in Cuphead, which if you watch my stream, I vehemently did not touch that. But the simple mode cuts down on the number of phases. It makes the game slower in a sense, and the fact that the enemies aren't as attacking as aggressively. But the downside is you can't finish Cuphead playing it on simple difficulty. The final two levels, the casino and the devil fight, have to be played on normal, and from what people are saying, you can't even access that level without beating the rest of the game on normal. And
cool.
This is goes back to what we were just saying. This is why I think it's very risky to have multiple difficulty levels, because it varies the goalposts or the baseline of what it means to play. If someone just plays a game on easy and you're not and they're expecting you to go to normal, what's the motivation or the impetus to learn the game at that level if you just have an easy setting? It's again why I think the Dark Souls series has done so well, by the fact that, again, it has that bar. When you clear it, the rest of the game becomes open to you and it gets better from there. I mean, anyone who's played Dark Souls knows that there is a wall that you have to break through when trying to play that game. For those of you who watch me play 1, 2, and now 3, you know when I start playing, I am going to die at least 10 to 15 times just getting that flow back in. But then once you do that, it becomes easier over time to play.
Yeah, and that is its own. I feel like the beating a hard game in terms of arcade games and Twitch gaming. Beating a game is the reward you're looking for, not necessarily accessing the content. Getting to those end credits, as it's addictive. It's something that you strive to accomplish. So again, it's just you can't change the medium, and this discussion about the difficulty levels is absolutely correct most of the time. I try to defend it here and there, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. You have to make a separate game. You have to make a game with easiness in mind.
Or you're just, tweaking values that can inherently break the game. For instance, when I played Nier, I know Nier Automata, this was the one before Nier Automata, I think it was just called Nier. Their hard mode was basically you would die in 2 hits to common enemies. And I was like, at that point, it's like, yes, it's hard, but I don't really want to learn that game. Like, it's not going to be an interesting challenge. It's just going to be difficulty for the sake of difficulty.
Yeah, El Gordo's comment right there, I think, is great. Let's just see. Also, 666 there. That's a good comment. But I just wanted to bring up this walking sims is that bridge between film and a game, and I think that is a very good insight there. And correct on that.
Yeah. And we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, Josh and I, about, like, there are some games that you can't make accessible because it's inherent in their design. We were talking about Space Chem, for instance. I've played Space Chem many times in the last 4 or 5 years. I am never going to beat that game. It's not going to happen. My brain is not wired that way. And that's okay. Like, he was saying, like, he's not a fan of football, so it doesn't matter how accessible they make Madden, he's not going to want to play that game, and that's fine. Like, it's not up to the game to kind of make you want to play it. Like, you should want to play this game, or you should know what you're getting into beforehand.
Yeah, and that brings up another discussion on, and I have very strong opinions on this, is do you make a game for the players, or do you make a game that you want to play? And that is, that's a whole other thing right there.
Yeah, and it kind of leads into that talk about, the importance of playtesting. Like, you don't make the game for yourself, but you also have to have an intended audience. If I'm going to make my game for e-sport loving pinball players, well, that's what my game is going to be about. If you don't like that, you're not the market for it. But with that said, though, there are things you can do to make your game more accessible that aren't about making it easier. We've talked about UI design, tutorial design, things to make the game easier to understand without dulling its edge. Like,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you remember, I did that video looking at the Cuphead tutorial. I think it was like 2-3 weeks ago. I got a comment from someone saying, "Oh, you just want all games to be," he said a lot more strongly, but mind-numbingly dumb. But that's not the point. Making a tutorial easy is just trying to make it easier to understand. It's not touching the rest of the game. And that, I think, is one of the things that it always conflates the argument, because people will say, oh, if you add a tutorial, you're just dumbing it down. Or if we, this actually leads back into that discussion about fighting games. And when Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite announced the easy combo system, it made pro players, throw a fit, because they felt they were dumbing the game down. But the question is, what is the meat of the game? What is your core gameplay loop? Like in Dark Souls, your core gameplay loop is, very challenging hand or melee-based combat. So that has to be the hook. But you can certainly make it easy to understand, what stats do. How do I heal? What are my options in play? But a lot of people, again, will conflate difficulty as, the be-all, end-all of your game.
Yeah, I do agree that having a tutorial does not designate the difficulty of a game. Although, I look at Dota, which is one of my favorite examples of here's a tutorial, but good luck finding your way to the rest of the game. Because it's they hold your hand and then they basically shove you off a cliff.
Yes.
And that there is the other extreme. I don't mind a good a tutorial that shows everything, as long as it's one of those things where either you can just opt out or it isn't that long to get through,
or it's entertaining enough that you actually keep your interest, because no one wants to watch an hour-long tutorial that puts you to sleep 10 minutes in. And we've said this before, but there is an art to making an effective tutorial. And again, it's one of those very underappreciated aspects. And so is I have two completely random tangents. But the first one, when I was talking about Cuphead, apparently my tweet guy liked from a barbershop quartet, because I mentioned how great the barbershop quartet was in Cuphead. That made my week right there. We got, if the barbershop quartets are in favor of me, I can't go wrong.
Right.
But the other point was, I made this video about first plays, or the importance of the first time experience, and I played this indie game lately that it was so bad the first 10 minutes of play that I didn't want to play this game anymore. And it didn't matter how much work the person put into it, how passionate they were about it. I just was like, I don't want this game anymore, and that's not a good experience to be had.
No, it's not. And I know some of the people I've worked with, they've had that whole tutorial problem in terms of the publishing. Our first game, he launched it and there was some tutorial, but he realized he needed to add a lot more, and he basically made it kind of achievement based, so that you had goals and you could either ignore them or do them. But they would help you along if you followed them. And then another guy, the more recent one, Venture Forth, his game had nothing, and he had to make a level specific to just kind of easing you into the gameplay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is one thing that most people, especially indies, they're about making the game. They're not about letting people play it. So it's a difficult thing to get over. And for a big company, you can actually put resources in specific to that, but how many people do that?
Yeah. And what was I about to say? I got distracted by Brightest Dungeon and all that.
Bright Souls.
Yeah, when it comes to that first experience, I've seen it again, I'm sure you have as well, from the independent space, that they have some very imaginative games that are almost incomprehensible unless you have the developer standing right there going it over with you.
Yeah.
Let me see. What was I about to say? Oh, one other interesting bit of news. I was hearing more stuff from At the Gates developer John Schaefer. Do you know about At the Gates, Rob?
I don't.
Do you know who John Schaefer is?
I know Schaefer. I don't know John Schaefer. I know Tim
Uh,
Schaefer.
John Schaefer was the lead designer on Civilization 5.
Ah, cool.
And after the game was done, he left Firaxis and did a Kickstarter for the game At the Gates. And it has not been going too well. I'm going to have a industry insight about this in a few days, but it seems like it's one of those cases where you can have a really great designer, but it doesn't sound like he had the knowledge or the skill base in terms of project management or looking beyond just design the game to get it done. And the game has been in limbo now for several years, and there are Kickstarters who donate to it who are basically calling for his head on a pike right now because the game, it really shows no signs of being done. He has, and it got to the point where he was suffering from like depression and some health issues from trying to put this game together.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that I don't know how to get around a lot of that stuff. It's if it happens, it's not going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, right now the game was originally due out in 2014, done in 2014, and right now it's not even finished its alpha state at the moment. And I've spoken to him 3 times on previous podcasts, and each time we spoke for a good 3 hours a pop. And I mean, the ideas he had for the game were amazing, but again, I'm sure as you're aware of, designing a game and building a game are two very different things.
They are. They should be all part of the same, but too often they are separated with a chasm between them.
Josh is asking in chat, is he pulling a Molyneux? I don't think it's a Molyneux situation that he's promised all kinds of things and it completely changed. I think this is more he got, I think, way in over his head with the original idea. Like, I'm looking, and his last update was in May of this year on his Kickstarter page, and supposedly he was supposed to release an alpha at the end of September. Let me see. Yeah, September 30th was supposed to be the alpha being done, and nothing has happened. And I really feel for the guy because the idea sounded amazing. But again, it's one of those things like we were just saying regarding play testing and tutorial design that it is very hard as an indie developer to basically have to build everything yourself. It's different when you're at a studio when you have 20, 30 people alongside you who can do this, or you have someone basically overseeing the whole project.
Yeah. There was a guy who approached me to help publish his game. This was a year and a half ago, and he sent me. He was like going to be doing this game. It was massive, and he had worked on I forget which project, might have been Unreal or something along those lines, some successful shooter. Yeah. And he was doing his own project, and he sent me like, okay, the game's going to cost this much, and it's going to be done here. And I looked at the scope, and I'm like, there's no way it's going to be done for this much money and in this amount of time. And he sent me this schedule that was just an Excel spreadsheet with dates on it and tasks attached to those dates, like maybe 12 to 15 steps. And nothing against someone making a schedule that much, but as an indie developer, if you aren't very realistic about how long it takes you to do something, you're in trouble. And certainly in a Kickstarter situation. Again, the latest game we did, Venture Forth again, the Kickstarter failed, which was good in a way because the stuff that was promised, most of it could not be in. And as a single indie developer, if he had gotten the money, he would
just be
himself.
Put on task for that.
Yeah, and
like I said, and deservedly so, because it's different working on a game in your spare time compared to you're working on a game that you've pitched to hundreds or thousands of people who have donated you money to see it come through.
Yeah, and if you're not set up to hire other developers and teach them all the code, then you're SOL. You really have to have a plan for the money. You have to have a very liberal schedule because you kick this off. If you're an indie developer and you're not correct, like your budget gets you so far, you're going to run out of money, or in a Kickstarter you're not going to be able to deliver, and
Hmm.
there's just any number of things that are going to happen that are going to be a train wreck.
And even the unintended consequences, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone 2 to 3 years from now.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like with your example there, Rob, of him like having a spreadsheet of I'm going to do this, and this by September, and this, and this by November. Like, did that person actually plan that out? Like, is this actually like him knowing, or is he just, saying, "Oh, I'm just going to do all this. It's just going to happen," kind of thing.
Well, and that's just it. Without the level of detail from like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's old school, but like a waterfall chart, certainly there's whole agile methods and whatnot. But if you're doing a whole project, you're going to need to detail it out. And with a very like 12 to 15 light items, he might all have it in his head and it might be
Mm-hmm.
perfect, but he's not going to be able to convince anybody because he doesn't have anything detailed out. Excuse me. And even with small teams, one of my biggest frustrations is a team of people that are all working for free
Mm-hmm.
or very low amounts of money, even with a successful Kickstarter. The big problem is they don't allow for the fact, at least I consider the fact, that at least one of them is going to have to drop out for financial reasons, or at least is going to be out for a long period of
Mm-hmm.
time, and
Yeah.
that's going to delay everything. So
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of things that are pretty much inevitable that you don't think are, and you say no, but we're immune to that. Just a lot of
Everyone's always
pitfalls.
immune to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a very weird aside, but apparently, uh, also is saying that the game Overgrowth has been in early access for 7 years and it's finally near completed. And I actually own that game, and I don't remember buying it. Like, I don't know where this game came from, but it's in my library. I think someone gifted that to me because I've never played it, but it's there.
Yeah, early access has its own problems, certainly from a consumer standpoint. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. A game that's eternally in early access,
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of. I mean, there was a game, why
Mm-hmm.
can't I remember? It was like a small puzzle game, Metro.
Mm-hmm.
Great game, looks great, but it was in early access for just a super long time, and they didn't even have music in it for like a year. And that was very frustrating to me because I knew
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people were buying the game like crazy, and I just knew that they were still in early access, as if to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, we're not promising anything. We're still early access, so you can't complain.
Yeah.
And then certainly there's the other side of early access that you might think that that's going to happen. But if you go to Steam and you put yourself as early access, chances are
Mm-hmm.
you're going to drop off the radar and no one's going to buy your game, except on that maybe that first or couple of days when you're visible. But no one's going to care about your game off the top unless you have a following. So you're basically invisible in early access, and that does when you pitch that and you say we're in early access now, it doesn't mean anything to anybody because it's kind of lost
Mm-hmm.
any kind of value.
Yeah.
So going into early access, overstaying your welcome, or just being in early access so that people can play test your game
Mm-hmm.
easily. There, I just think that it's its own little bomb
Yeah.
to get into these days.
Yeah, like
Right.
the really good example of that is Space Base DF9, which was the Dwarf Fortress style game from
Oh
Double
god.
Fine, and they
Jeez.
went into early access, and they promised like 2 screens worth of goals and additional features and content that was coming, and then they said like when they're about to cancel or they were releasing the game, oh, that was on the intention that we were going to be funded for the next 3.5 years. So it's like, what?
Yeah. Whenever I hear someone say they're making a Dwarf Fortress-esque game, I just say, "Oh, you've already failed." Because that game has two people dedicated their lives to the game, and that is their profession is writing more content to Dwarf Fortress, and it's been over a decade to
Mm-hmm.
get where it is now, and the depth that it has is insane. So anyone who says, "Well, we're going to make a graphical version of Dwarf Fortress," well, to me, I'm just like, "Well, that's a fool's errand."
Yeah.
And I just assume they're going to fail, and I have not been proven wrong there
Yeah,
yet.
sadly, Clockwork Empires is another example of that. Not only of them basically over, getting in over their heads, but not understanding, the kind of work that goes into a game like that. I mean, I've talked
Mhm.
about this many times, but that game was just constantly being iterated on, and then they scrap it, then they iterate again, then they scrap that content. Like, it never felt like they were, they were basically stuck in Go, or they were stuck at zero for so long, and it just killed the studio.
Yeah, and to me, that's also where design comes in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have a solid design plan, and I'm happy to have people iterate, but I've talked about this with people at my day job,
Mm-hmm.
my job, I should just say,
Mm-hmm.
where agile methodology is never, not never, but it's rarely done as it should be, where you design a
Mm-hmm.
small piece and complete it and fix all the bugs and then design more and
Mm-hmm.
complete that, like get a plan and complete that plan
Mm-hmm.
and then add the next plan, instead of put something in and then put something else in and then not worry about testing until you're at a, like halfway through your overall
Mm-hmm.
concept. It's just it becomes a mess and you can't recover easily from that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and again,
Scientology.
and we've
That's so
seen that
funny.
before. Like when a game, they say, "Oh, we need to uh, create a new engine for our game," and it's only 75% done. I'm like, oh god,
Yeah, yeah,
there's the
exactly.
red light going off right there. Like a really good example of that kind of agile development, I would say, would be Prison Architect in early access. And what Introversion did was basically say, okay, this month we're going to work on this, 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 and this. That's what we're
Hmm.
going to do. We're going to make sure this works. It's done. Okay, it's now adapted. It's integrated into Prison Architect. We're not touching it again. Let's
Yeah.
move on to this, and we're going to do this, this, and this next month. If it doesn't work, well, we have this version of the game that's all done. We know it works up to this point.
Yeah.
And they were also really good on keeping those milestones. Like Elgora was saying, like they said once a month we're going to release a patch. We're going to update our game every 30 days, and they're going to do that. I think they only missed, I think, 1 or 2 months, and that was because I think someone got married or someone had a baby, and they took an extra month off.
Right.
But they were showing their work, and you could see iteratively game going from here to here to here, and getting done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. And I Prison Architect has been one of those that's been kind of on my number five of my list for the longest period of time. Keeps getting shoved down, but like hearing a game do that is very refreshing to me,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, too often the promises get made and then delivery can't be done because there isn't like this regularly scheduled goal, and
Mm-hmm.
it forces you, like you have this idea you want to implement, but then
Mm-hmm.
it kind of forces you to pare it back until it meets that criteria of a month.
Yeah.
And so you just get used to that. You get used to pushing things off, prioritizing, and just getting stuff done that you can get done in that period of time.
Yeah. And to this day, I would still like to know, like, what their actual intended scope was for Prison Architect. Like, did they add everything they wanted in, or did stuff get created, after they saw the success of that game? Because again, they were on early access for I think like 2.5, 3 years of monthly updates. Again, except for those two exceptions.
Yeah.
So I mean, either they were flying by the seat of their pants, or they had things, itemized down to a T of what they wanted and what their scope was.
Well, I feel like that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing it right, chances are you have thrown away so many of your
Oh
original
yes.
plans that it's ridiculous. That's the cutting room floor syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the best part about that kind of schedule, is it forces you to look reality in the face. And also, at some point, you're going to be like, well, that was a bad idea. I'm glad we haven't implemented that. And
Yeah.
here's a better one. We can implement that at some point in the future. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's exactly what they must have done.
Mm-hmm. And Darkest Dungeon, another really good example of surviving the early access process. I mean, I talked to Chris Barassa, I think it was either last week or the week before's cast about it, and he said like that was an experience for the team to get through early access.
Hmm.
But again, they knew they had a pretty solid game plan what they want. I still remember what he said, which was very funny, that the part of the game they felt they were going to have to iterate on the most, they never touched, like after the original version. I think it was either the heirloom system or the trinket system or the quirks. One of those two systems, he said, we were thinking, oh, we would have to, take it apart and do all this, and like, no, we never touched it again after that development.
That's cool.
Man, and again, like it's one of those things where you can kind of tell which developers are on the ball about this kind of development and which ones tend to struggle. Like when you see a game go from saying we're going to be done in November to saying we need 2.5 more years of development, something kind of got messed up along the way there.
Yeah, and like you say, there's that whole new engine, and we're adding way too much content, so we're jacking up the price. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous. You
Yeah.
get, I mean, your eyes get bigger than your abilities for the short term thing. Like, I can have
Yeah.
that done in a year for sure. And then once you realize how far away it is, you're just like, well, I'm going to make it years away. It can get silly.
And it's also, again, like one of those allures of indie development. The fact that you don't have a boss standing over your head saying, you must get this game out by November. But in the same breath, without having any kind of limitations, it makes it a lot harder to focus your goals and focus what you're able to do. And that leads to those, 5 to 10 year plus development cycles that we've seen in some cases.
Yeah.
What was I about to say? One second. I think Josh. Oh yeah. We were just talking about early access. Josh talked about Ark Survival, and one of the issues they had with the fact that they put DLC into an early access game, and like this goes back to what you were just saying, Rob. That the early access like tag or that qualifier has been thrown all over the place these days.
Yeah, and I mean, with the whole kind of floor dropping out from the indie scene on Steam, yeah, early access just is meaningless anymore. It's just meaningless. You might as well not even be on the store, I think.
And it's not going to get any easier. And as an interesting piece from news, there was this news piece regarding a Steam developer who basically made their money doing like shovelware and asset flip games. They got all 200 of their games removed from Steam, and now the company's folding. And unfortunately, not a lot of people are going to be losing sleep over that.
No, that's 200 games. Like the one that I've brought up before and that you talked about a couple of times, the guys who got sued, who tried to sue their people,
Slaughtering Grounds.
Yeah, they had what I consider to be shovelware. I mean, they had a good dozen games up there, and a dozen to 15, and I thought that was a lot. 200, holy cow, that's ridiculous. Exactly, 200 asset flips of assets they didn't make.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the news piece on Gamma Sutra at the moment, but like, then that's one of those things about when it comes to that level of quality, it's becoming harder and harder to create the quote-unquote budget game on Steam. Like Cuphead, I think one of the things I heard from a few people which was surprising that they were surprised by the fact that it was only a $20 game purchase, and that was just very interesting to me because I was like thinking about this the other night, like how much would someone like price a game like Cuphead? Like this goes back to what we were talking about with We Happy Few a few weeks ago. That after they got the publishing backing from Gearbox, they rose the price from 30 to 50 to eventually it's going to be 60. So with Cuphead, I'm surprised it didn't get higher up. Like they, with Microsoft's backing, they didn't make it a $30 game or a $40 game. And we talked about this before with the idea of a AAA platformer or a AAA indie game.
Yeah, it's pricing is always tough. Like you're entering just a dog eat dog market. You have a unique game that has gotten a lot of attention with Cuphead. I mean, it's a unique art style. It's just gorgeous. A lot of time and effort and money went into it, obviously. And you come out and you say, well, $20. Well, to me, they might not have had confidence that it was going to be looked upon as a 30 or higher game, which is surprising to me because it is exactly the kind of game that I would have expected to see on a Nintendo system growing up, and that would have automatically made it $60. So to me, that looks like a classic platformer, console platformer that should go for higher. And so, like you say, yeah, I'm surprised too. but they made that decision for some reason, whether it
Mhm.
be lack of confidence or just, damn it, that's what they were going to do.
Josh talking about not
That's,
enough time or energy to discuss pricing. Oh yes, that's
oh yeah,
that's a
exactly.
2 to 3 hour discussion on the short end of the scale.
Right.
Let me see. I found the name of it. The developer that was thrown off was Silicon Echo, who apparently was part of another company, Zanitron Productions. And it sounds like the developer was trying to. It was all from the same guy, though, so it sounds like he was, trying to rebrand himself as another studio. And that's kind of the issue. And this is what kind of sunk early access, or I'm sorry, not early access, Greenlight for the longest time. That everyone was just putting up these, paint drying simulator or make guy jump game. Get me on Steam for like $1, and it's getting harder and harder for those games to exist, which is a good thing. But again, it's very tricky to see the difference for a lot of consumers between this guy's a disreputable game developer because he's an asset flipper, this guy's a first time developer just, trying to just make their first game as a living kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's also the danger that I've seen a
Mm-hmm.
lot of. Basically, what you get is people using the game developer tool, or what do you call it?
Unity, Game Maker.
Game Maker tool, and you can see that they're basically making the tutorial
Mm-hmm.
and putting in their own assets, and it just, you can tell that's exactly what they've done. And it might be longer than the tutorial length gives you, but that's what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get a ton of games like that. It's a little harder for the casual observer to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just another one of those. They didn't do much work at all.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we give them money? They didn't seem to care enough to give us good content.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's what I believe has doomed Greenlight, is that everyone and their brother is just kind of sticking stuff on there to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And now you get people who are just trying to legitimately make a game. It might not look great, and they don't have a following yet, but yeah, they're just trying, and
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna get sunk.
Yeah. And let me see here. As another really good example, again, like the challenges of project management and such, I've been waiting for the game Shadowhand that I've talked about a few times. It's the game from the developer behind, crap, I forget the name, Regency Solitaire. We talked about this before. And he is an established developer at this point. He's been making games now for over, I think, 10, 15 years as an indie developer, and his game is still being delayed. Like, he still has gone over what he intended. And hi, Random Chicken, thanks for coming on. But the point is, it doesn't matter if you are a first time developer or a triple A or you've had like 15, 20 years of experience. These things can happen. As you said a few minutes ago, Rob, all these situations, we always think it's never going to happen to us. But
Hmm.
you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, basically.
Yeah, you do have to have those. Just, you have to plan in for that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who are not as experienced just don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because it's one of those things you don't think you're gonna have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. I like a
But you do.
Regency Solitaire too, Josh. I play that. I also played a Fairy Solitaire until one of my friends started making fun of me because he's like, "Josh, you've been playing that game a whole lot. Don't you have other games to play?" I'm like, fine, I'll switch off of it. But yeah, it's always tricky again when it comes to this kind of management, especially when you're building something new. We've talked about this time and time again. There is no guidebook to making a video game. There are elements that are standardized that we can learn from, but creating a unique game, there's no checklist for it. I spoke with Abby Games for Renowned Explorers. I think this was 2 years ago. He told me that they spent a year in hell making Renowned Explorers. Like, they had no idea what they were doing with that game, and they weren't sure it was going to come out right. And thankfully it did come out. But again, like, they were just going by, day to day what they were building with that one.
Yeah, it's been many the time, and working in games and making my own game are two very different things, and
Hmm.
I'm struggling to do the latter.
Hmm.
But the one thing that I found is that you have this great game idea, and you just know it's going to be amazing, and you really
Hmm.
want to make it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you do that, you realize that your abilities and the tool sets available to you are a giant ceiling. So even if you get a team together, you have to figure out the how
Oh
before you can
yes.
actually get the game out there, and that in itself is it is a giant, monolithic thing to get over. And I don't, I've been through it. I don't judge anyone who's going through the same thing. It's hard. It's just you got to recognize that it's game making is super difficult. It is so difficult, and not many people really realize that. I think they might agree, but they don't really realize how hard it is.
Oh yes, I have come up with a few dream ideas of myself. I have a few design documents on Game Wisdom about it, and it is very easy to think of game design in your head. But when you're actually trying to think, okay, what's the engine I'm going to use, or how are we going to plan out the next 2 to 3 years of scope for it? That's
Yeah.
another story entirely.
Well, I mean, you forget about the assets. Like you might even be like, well, yeah, I want this sprite and that sprite and that sprite. Well, then you
Hmm.
need the animations for every state of every sprite. And if you're not even doing sprites, if you're doing 3D modeling, well, you got to have every state and every animation, all the skeletons and all that kind of stuff. And wow, it just becomes dizzying, and that's not even including sound effects and music and score and UI and tutorials as we've talked about. Yeah, it's a giant mess once you really start to think about it.
Hmm. And how long is it going to take, and what happens if there's a delay? What if the programmer takes an extra month or two to do his task? Is that going to push everybody behind? And again, it's that snowball effect of one thing goes wrong and then everything starts to go wrong around you.
Yeah, you just need that initial plan,
Hmm.
that initial like reality check. Okay, if we can get here by this time, then we can at least plan our next few steps. But
Hmm.
yeah, to solidify everything and just say it's all going to be done by this time, yeah, you've just you've written your own eulogy basically.
Hmm. But with that said, though, it's you still have to do that level of planning. We talked about this before, that a lot of developers don't like to plan things out that far. They think it kills the artistic process, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you need to have someone thinking about this. I spoke with my friend Trayvon, who's working on his first game, Bullock, Mayan Warfare. I think I'm pretty sure I brought the story up, but we were talking on chat, and he said that no matter how popular or how big we become, I don't want a studio that has more than 20 people in it, because I just see that as a logistical nightmare. And a lot of people, and I think that's very fair. As we've said, it's different making a game by yourself versus making a game with 20, 30 people, either locally or spread throughout the world, and so on.
Yeah, deciding to make a game business is way different than deciding to make a game.
Mm-hmm.
And the infrastructure you need and the personnel you need just to handle personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course payment and taxes and benefits and who lives in what state or country and how that works tax wise and legal wise. I'm actually I wanted to comment on Josh's comments
Mm-hmm.
there. I'm actually looking forward to you guys talking because it seems like a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
comments you're bringing up, Josh, are pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to hearing more
yeah.
about them.
And like you were saying, without people living in different parts. When I spoke with the developers behind the Dark Side Detective a few weeks ago, they told me like one of the ways they cut down the cost of living was they were just constantly moving around. So they were just like living in random parts of the world, designing the game for like a good like year or so of its development. Or when I
Wow.
spoke with Robot Loves Kitty, and for their first game, they lived in a treehouse for I think 2 to 3 years making their first game. So again, every developer's story is different, and it becomes very hard to come up with like a standard list of do this, this, and this, and you'll have a top 10 best-selling game on Steam.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no. I mean, I believe that there is a right way to do
Mm-hmm.
things, but there's not like a secret. You'll get a top 10. You'll make a
Mm-hmm.
million dollars. That does not
Go
exist.
live
But
off a private island for the rest of your days.
Right, exactly. That's not something you should or can plan for, unless you're like a AAA developer, in which
Hmm.
case you have all the math and all the marketing money. But chances are you don't have the marketing money or the marketing people to tell you how to spend it.
Hmm.
Um, the yeah, all that stuff just kind of the best ways to go about it is just do what you can, get some people together who like your concept, your game, and then flesh it out with them checking it out on occasion. And that's really the only way to go about it. I don't see
Hmm.
many other paths.
Yeah. Now
Not to
here's.
derail this too much.
Now speaking about like random games, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about some game called Golf Story. Have you heard anything about that one?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
I think it's supposed to be some kind of like Stardew Valley meets a golf game or something like
Huh.
that. I think it's only available on the Switch though, which is unfortunate because I still don't have access to that. But we better move on to at least another topic because I think we just spent the last 50 minutes on just that one.
Yeah.
Um, some other things that. Oh wait, let me just see. Golf Stories Earthbound plus Golf. Okay, well that's definitely interesting. Oh, you're doing a voiceover for Free Sphere. Free Sphere. Nice, Josh. Um, this week I got the press key for Etrian Odyssey 5, which I've been slowly but surely trying to weed into my schedule. And the game is still under embargo, so I can't talk about it. But I can talk about my experience with the Etrian Odyssey series. We've talked about this before. It's a very challenging dungeon crawler. Every time I play those games, I have to spend at least 30 minutes to an hour building my party for the first time. I get into this kind of like a min-max brain freeze of, okay, I want this guy, but he doesn't synergize with her, so let me take him out, let me put this one in. And it's just like 30 minutes to an hour of me just messing around before we even start going to the dungeon.
Yeah. That's I know exactly what you mean. It's that particular part of tweaking. Getting stuck at the beginning of the game seems like a frustrating thing to deal with, but I do love that aspect of a lot of games.
Also, as an interesting point, for those of you who saw my play of Super Hydora, I had a chance to speak with ArcLight Studios, the publisher behind, and they work with Loco Molito on making those games. I did a podcast with them the other day, and it turns out I've been mispronouncing all their games and developer names for the last year and a half. So, to any Spanish speaking fans watching, I do apologize for horribly butchering those titles. But it was a lot of fun talking to them and kind of hearing what's going on. They're based out of Barcelona, Spain, obviously, and about kind of like the growth of the game industry there. Thank you, El Gordo. Finally pronounced Loco Molito right. I need those enunciation guides that they have on Google, when they show, you say it like this, and here's the inflection. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to still butcher one of their games very easily. Let me see. Are there any other topics we can jump onto, at least for a few more minutes? Because I know it is getting a little bit late.
Well,
Oh,
unless if someone doesn't, oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just about to say, I know Grim Dawn has their expansion. I think it's coming out any day now. So that's going to be another interesting one. Because again, you're a big fan of Torchlight. And this is another, let me see, do we even have a pricing for it right now? Let me see. No, still no price. Oh, but it's coming out October 11th, so that should be a lot of fun. But
Cool.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say like unless the folks on the chat have a specific one. I remember we had talked loosely about the JRPG versus the American
Oh
style.
yes. Oh, that's probably gonna be another good 30 minutes to an hour. But we'll see if we can get through some of it tonight. So, for those of you who missed it, on our Discord channel, we had an entire conversation about JRPG versus CRPG design. And it turns out one of the Joshes was not a fan of Persona 5. And we kind of talked about how a lot of JRPGs are still really stuck in, the 90s and early thousands era when it comes to development. And Oh man, Persona 5, that was one that I know a lot of people just fell in love with it, but I kind of burned out on it. I think I got to like the last dungeon. I was like, I don't want to play this game anymore. But I know you didn't have a chance to play Persona 5 yet, right, Rob?
No, I haven't. I got to say that even though I started out on American built RPGs with Bard's Tale, 1985 or something like that, 86. Um, the time that the thing that brought me back was Final Fantasy VII, of course the famous JRPG that kind of brought a lot of people onto that series. And I really do. I love a party based. I like turn based, and their ridiculous stories and whatnot was a lot of fun to go through. Certainly, the game was incredibly long, but I kind of liked that. And that's something that to me is it is a kind of a retro feel these days. The grinding, absolutely, the grinding is a pain in the butt, and there are all kinds of things that I wish they could do to mitigate that. I don't mind random encounters as long as they're like a special part of the game instead of just like you're walking along and you're just, oh good, I have to kill another spider, great, and you get like no experience and no gold. So I don't mind random encounters if they're used properly. There's certainly a lot of tools that they could put into their bag about that will ease grinding and ease that kind of thing. I think grinding, you have to recognize that you can build up the story and you can keep the story going and include grinding along the way in terms of like you don't have to go out and just beat monsters for an hour before you can move on. You can just kind of, like ARPGs do a really good job of just forcing you forward and allowing you to level up at the same time pretty seamlessly, and you don't have to go back and grind a lot. There's other things that are tiresome, but certainly yeah.
But like another example would be something like South Park: The Stick of Truth, or RPGs where there are fixed encounters, and every fight, you know where all the fights are going to be at any time, and it kind of keeps the game moving forward and makes sure that you're not going to be under level for a part. Because if a level only has 5 encounters, well, that's it. That's all you're going to have for those 5 encounters.
Yeah. I do believe there's a time and a place for grinding, but even then it has to be limited. In terms of planned encounters, I appreciate that to some extent, but I do like a little bit of difference. I don't like rails necessarily. So there again, there's an in-between, a middle ground there. I think that there can be. I know Torchlight, one of the things I love about it is that the dungeons are randomly generated, and so you'll get into a dungeon that's familiar. Things are located in slightly different areas, and there might be slightly different features and mini bosses throughout. So it's not exactly the same. You can say it's the same. It certainly is from a broader standpoint, but I like that slight difference, the slight change in it.
Yep, or something like Diablo 3, where every level unlocks something new. You're always being rewarded. So there's not really that sense of grinding. Everything is just tailored to whatever your experience is at that time. I think that's kind of why the end game falls apart for me, because that progression goes away once you hit level 70.
Yeah. And towards the RPG, like the benefits of that inspired a lot of stuff from these ARPGs. I thought they were very good, like adding gems into your weapons and that kind of stuff too, instead of just leveling up and picking what you wanted, strength and you wanted agility this time. There were a lot of benefits. There was the skill trees and the massive skill trees that you could get. I like the fact that those were implemented in ARPGs and made a lot smoother, and I wish they could somehow take the turn-based and I'm sure games are doing this all the time, and I just have not played them yet. And I firmly believe that that's the case, because I might have a brilliant idea. All I have to do is do a Google search and find, it's been done already. So that's something I would love to try out if anyone has any recommendations.
Yeah, I know like game like Earthbound allows you, like, once you're leveled up enough, the enemies will run away from you, so you don't have to fight them anymore when going back to lower level areas. I'm also looking forward to the Phone Destroyers game and the Fractured So-and-so. I don't want to get in trouble on YouTube for saying that, but Phone Destroyers is the free-to-play, like, PvP based game that's going on mobile. And of course, Butthole is going to be the sequel to the Stick of Truth.
Interesting. I still have yet to play Stick of Truth, which is to my detriment, I'm sure.
But yeah, it's very interesting. I know we were talking about this on Discord. How much the CRPG side has really evolved over the last decade. Stuff like everything from The Witcher to what they've done with Fallout. I was just playing a Battle Chasers Night War. I think that's what it was called. It was kind of a mix of JRPG, but with like American kind of focus to it. And like we're seeing like innovations like that. I'm just being on the safe side, Josh, because I know YouTube is a little bit coming down when it comes to demonetizing videos at the moment. But it's very interesting to see where RPG design has evolved. And speaking of which, we've seen RPGs go on, first-person shooters. We've seen The Division, Destiny, Borderlands, and so on have adapted RPG mechanics and systems to them.
Yeah. I mean, RPG systems is certainly, they've bled into everything. Sports games, just everything you can imagine has RPG elements these days. But the one thing I got to say, one of my biggest complaints about the American and European systems compared to the Japanese is that I like things to be kind of crazy and far out and weird sometimes, and you tend not to get that as much in the American stuff. It's just hyper-realism is what a lot of the graphics tend to go for, which isn't necessarily my favorite thing. But also there seems to be this kind of tie-in to some kind of reality that sometimes I like things to be random sometimes. I thought that's why I loved Cuphead, because it just reintroduced those old school cartoons that were completely out of the blue. Like these people, I would love to have met the people who made some of those old cartoons, because they are insane.
Oh, yes. I have the Looney Tunes... We're just talking in chat there. I have the Looney Tunes Golden Collection. I have all 6 DVDs of that. It's like a good 100 hours of Looney Tunes cartoons right there.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of that stuff is crazy. And like we saw some of that in Cuphead, like some of like those boss screens. Like I know El Gordo's favorite one is when you kill the bird boss, the paramedics that are holding the stretcher up start taking out salt and pepper and
I love that
seasoning
detail.
Him.
I love that detail. That is one of my favorite things of that game, is that chicken fight. Certainly, I mean, I can. I'll just stop right there, because we'll just keep going there. I have a fondness for animation, and that'll get me in trouble sometimes. So.
We give a damn about nice. Yeah, but like getting back to like CRPGs, and I think I agree with you, Rob, that they feel very, I guess, like vanilla in that sense when it comes to their mechanics and systems. Like you really can't dig deep into them the same way as something like Shin Megami Tensei or Etrian Odyssey, which is weird because Etrian Odyssey was based on the old school wizardry dungeon crawlers. Like when I play, this is one of the things that killed me about like Fallout or the Elder Scrolls series. It felt like I played it for 10 minutes and that's it in terms of the depth of these systems. The rest of it is just, you taking this and spend the next 50 to 100 hours exploring. But I like being able to, dig into those systems, create those crazy combinations. It's one of the things I love about playing like CCGs, for instance. Figuring out how do I create this deck around this one card kind of thing.
Yeah, and I will jump in about what you said about wizardry. I mean, a lot of the core RPG stuff, of course, goes straight to the old Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing. And I feel like it was just a culture adaptation type thing, where they really took it and ran with it. And I feel like since then, the Western stuff has taken that and ran with it onto themselves. So it's just the stealing inspiration and then making it your own. That's kind of what I'm imagining we're going to look forward to soon. I just don't know when.
Yeah. Like for me, like I did not get into the Mass Effect series, which will probably, if this video gets out there, will probably make me a target very fast. But like the combat system, it just didn't hook me. And I've talked about this before, but if your basic gameplay loop doesn't interest me, I don't care how great your story is. I'm not going to spend the next 30 to 50 hours playing that game.
Hmm. Yeah.
Speaking about like crazy RPGs, I know I brought this one up before, but have you heard of the game Resonance of Fate, Rob?
No, no. And by the way, Josh, we're avoiding your question.
uh,
God, I want to say Fallout is something that I feel like qualifies. Fallout 3. I feel like that qualifies, but I could be wrong.
I guess if I had to go with D&D, maybe like Knights of the Old Republic, or yeah, I think that would probably be like the last like BioWare game I really enjoyed. But Resonance of Fate is just an insane RPG. It's like it's a bullet time dashing turn-based RPG where characters flip around the air as tactical moves during combat. And it's just a crazy game to play. If it was available like to stream on PS4, I would play the hell out of that one. It's up there with The World Ends With You as one of those games where everything makes no sense, and yet it makes sense because of how crazy it all is.
Yeah, I do like that. I feel like going to the D&D stuff. I was just watching. It reminded me Planescape Torment, Sanitarium. I thought those games do a very good job of making things a little bit crazy and a little bit out there while still maintaining the Western feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for me, I'm just like the whole. That's kind of one of those weird things. When I was growing up, I completely ignored CRPGs. I was into JRPGs. Then I fell out of JRPGs, and then I started playing like The Witcher and stuff. And then I got back into JRPGs when like Persona 3, Shimigami Tensei Nocturne started to get really popular again.
Yeah, that one, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, that had my favorite game strategy guide. Just hands down for me, this is my favorite.
I have it behind me too. It's like a 500-page monster like that, and the Disgaea, I think 3 guide. Those are weapons. You can just like knock someone out with them, and they won't get up. And oh man, if we start talking about guides, we'll be here till like 1 o'clock in the morning. I can feel it. But yeah, that was just an amazing guide. And again, trying to get back to the topic at hand, I guess for you, Rob, do you enjoy like the Skyrim, Fallout 4, that kind of, again, it's very basic system, but it gives you this whole world to do it in, kind of thing.
I like open world enough, but I feel like like Skyrim, I'm not a fan of that. It might just be the genre for me. I much prefer the Fallout genre. But certainly, oh boy, the open world stuff, I hesitate to go into it a lot, just because I feel like it's just an invitation to spend all your time with us and don't play anything else. That's the part that gets me. I like somewhat of a contained world. I feel like games are pretty much a series of rules that you have to follow and participate in. And the wider that rule set, the less interest I have, because I just want some contained entity to try out. Yeah. And certainly that's my feeling on the open world stuff.
Yeah. It's the same with like the open world, the action-based games, and how they give you this whole wide world to do stuff in. There's just not a whole lot of actual interesting stuff to do in said world.
Are you talking about like Path of Exile and that kind of thing?
I was thinking of games like Just Cause, Mad Max,
gotcha.
Assassin's Creed, stuff like that. We were just talking, Josh and I, about Assassin's Creed and how that kind of became the foundation for a lot of the open world games we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I own Fallout 3, but I never got around to playing it. Beyond just, again, that initial feel, it's like, yay, I'm playing this game. It's like, is this what I'm going to have to deal with for the next 100 hours of exploration? Okay, we're We're gonna
That
go
just
away.
like Final Fantasy VII got me back into JRPGs. I feel like Fallout 3 got me back into CRPGs because I really liked that world they made. There was a lot of problems I had with like the story and whatnot, but I was like, well, you know what? It's a crazy thing. Why not just go with it? So I mean, I love their art style. It did get a little bit too drudgery at times, but I liked what they did. It was interesting to me.
Yeah. And I think this actually wraps around to what we were originally talking about with story versus experience. There are a lot of people who will play these games just for the lore or for the role playing aspects of it. And it's just very hard, again, I think, to separate the two and in some cases combine the two. Like I said, with something like Mass Effect, the gameplay didn't hook me, and when that fell, I don't care about 3 games of story and lore and choices if your basic gameplay isn't there to hook me. But like something like Cuphead, or even as another good example, I just uploaded a video of the game I did of Omega Strike. This is a 2D like Metroidvania Metal Slug kind of game. It was all created by one person, and it's not the longest game. It's not the most involved game, but the fundamentals were on point. The controls feel good, the gameplay is solid, and like that's something like I would sit and play for, 3 to 5 hours like it's nothing. The same with Cuphead. Like if your foundation is good, I will come back and play it time and time again. But if your game annoys me, I don't care if it breaks open 50 hours in or 100 hours in. I'm not going to trudge my way through it.
Yeah, and I'm bringing up the community created content. I know we've gone over that a little bit, but geez, that is oh my god, that I love community created content, and I feel like that does extends the life of a game so much in a good way, as opposed to just here you go, here's whatever. As a Planet Coaster fan, that's the world to me.
What did you think about the Bethesda Creations Club or Creators Club? There we go.
That I would have to let other people answer because I'm not as familiar with that as perhaps I should be.
That was their idea of basically having paid mods for their games, but it's not called paid mods. It's called something else, and we try to do the legal rodeo for that. I think we'll start spinning our eyes in our heads there. But yeah, the Creation Kit is different than the Creation Club. El Gordo or Oscar is talking about the actual modding software, and I agree with you there, Rob, that having those toolkits available, it definitely extends the life of a game, and sometimes it creates things that no one thought was possible. As a very funny aside, the Long War mod, I know we talked about this with XCOM, that was created without any modding tools, I think, whatsoever. They just saw the game and said, we want to make this game better, and they just create everything by hand. But, when they did for XCOM 2 and they had the modding support, it has definitely helped that game. I mean, my friends and I, we have our own list of quality of life mods. And sometimes those mods become integrated into the full game, and sometimes those creators get to go on and do something else. You mentioned, of course, Planet Coaster. A really good example for me would be Cities Skyline. Was that what it was called? Cities Skylines?
Skylines, yeah.
I think we may have talked about this. If not, one of the more popular modders for that game, he was fired from Maxis after the failure of SimCity 5. So in order to help make his money, or help make money while he was working, he set up a Patreon page that he would create custom buildings for a city skyline that you could be adopted in as mods from the workshop. And it actually earned him some notoriety, and it probably, I think, helped him get a job after that. Because he could point to all this amazing stuff he did in the game, and that he was paid via the Patreon. But of course, it was integrated for free into the game.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole payment for mods thing is such a sticky thing. We'll discuss that another time.
Yeah, that's another 2 hours right there. Yeah, and exactly, child. With Stalker being another good example. Stalker had the mod Stalker Complete. That was a top to bottom restoration and evolution of the game, that it updated the graphics, it fixed the bugs, it smoothed out some of the difficulty curves of it, and it made the game an almost completely different title. And I'm trying to remember another game that had something like that, and I'm failing on it. That there's a game that either I played or someone was telling me, not the Long War, but something else that basically it completely revolutionized the base game. Ugh. And of course I can't say anything because I can't remember what it is. I have not played Prey yet. I almost completely butchered that sentence too. I played the original Prey, not Prey 2017. What about you, Rob?
Nope, have not. I've been stuck in my own little world of Torchlight 2 and Planet Coaster. So,
but we are approaching an hour and a half in, so I think it may be time to wrap things up if that works for you, Rob.
oh yeah, of course. I mean, certainly, I love talking here, but yeah, we can get out of hand pretty quick.
Ah, yes. So maybe we'll save paid mods for next week if someone can remember that.
Yeah.
But we're going to wrap things up for this week's edition of Game Wisdom Live. So thank you so much for watching. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out Rob on twitch.tv/IndieVoyageRob. You are doing nightly streams as well as weekend streams, right?
Trying to get back into nightly, but mostly weekend and the occasional nights stream.
Awesome. And for me, for those of you guys watching this live tonight, right now I'm thinking about doing a mix of Asura and some Dark Souls 3, because now I need to get to the new DLC to show that off. If you're watching this recorded right now or live, again, if you'd like to chat with us frequently, $1 or more on patreon.com/gwbeister gets you into our private Discord channel. Like I said at the start, I'm going to be doing some updates to Patreon over the next few days, and I'll make a kind of a soft launch on probably either the weekend or Monday by the latest, including the new $100 goal and some new little gimmicks and I guess little treats for people to vote on. But we'll see what happens there. For this week's Perceptive Podcast, let me see. This will either be my chat with Trayvon about Bullock or my chat with Z regarding Mystic Melee. I'll have to check the list after this. But otherwise, that is going to do it. So we'll be back next Thursday around 9:30 for another chat. And again, I'm sure Rob and I will be chatting on Discord throughout the week. But thanks again for tuning in. I'll be back in a little bit with our game streaming. But until then, have a good rest of the evening.